How does a railway connect rural communities? How did these communities become disconnected by the beaching cuts, and how could these communities once again be linked by the reopening of old lines? Also look at the All the Stations project and how their exploration of the railways through visiting every station in Great Britain has inspired many to do similar trips, to see how vital a railway is. A railway has a very important role to play in a community. In a rural area, people take the train for a vast number of reasons, including to get to work, to get to school and to go shopping. The Island Line, between Ryde Pierhead and Shanklin on the Isle of Wight, is all that remains of the once vast network of railways on the island that often carried Queen Victoria's royal train. The only trains on this line date from 1938, and were in use on the London Underground until 1988. This line provides a good source of income for the towns along its route. A lot of tourists visit the Isle of Wight every year, and in the summer the trains are always full. Local people take the train to the pier to get to jobs in Portsmouth, and tourists change onto the steam railway at Smallbrook Junction. This line is the fastest way from the mainland to the island and waits for the passenger ferry each time. The network was once much larger, but ridership decreased and all but today's route closed over many years. Many of these closures orchestrated by Dr. Beeching. Beeching published his report just after the first motorway was built in the UK, with car ownership skyrocketing. This had led to passenger and freight traffic on already little-used railways dropping significantly, and so British Rail was losing millions of pounds a year. Dr. Beeching, a well-known accountant, was brought in to turn that loss into a large growth. That is what he achieved, with his report bringing a major change to the style of the railways. British Rail brought in key sectors, Network South East, intercity and regional railways on what was left of the network. Branch Line Britain, as it was known, was dead. Over 50% of stations and 1/3 of track was closed by the report, with very few exceptions. This led to widespread problems with industry, as rail lost more usership from Welsh wool farms and the Sheffield Steel Works. Beeching's new railway involved different types of train, electric and diesel multiple units for local lines, along with high-speed intercity trains. The railways were in even worse decline, as even in London rail ridership reached an all-time low. Buses and planes were viewed as the way forward, and trains were expected to be gone by 1990. But local people didn't want to lose the way of life that is a railway, and so heritage railways were opened, run by volunteers, on many of Beeching's axes. This was the beginning of the rebirth of the railway. With privatization in the 1990s came increased demand for infrastructure upgrades. Many of Beeching's closed lines have been rebuilt as railways, such as the Robin Hood Line in Nottinghamshire, tramways in Manchester and the West Midlands, and in Cambridgeshire the busway. Many more lines and stations are likely to be reopened, with Kenilworth on the Coventry to Leamington line opening on the 18th of February. The Varsity Line, in Cambridgeshire, was closed in 1967, however it was not included in Beeching's report. The line has been reopened between Oxford and Bicester as part of the East-West Rail scheme, and it is hoped it will reach Cambridge by 2030. This line will link currently very rural and cut-off communities like Bourne and Comerton with fast, direct links into Cambridge Station and onto London. The All the Stations project, headed by Jeff Marshall and Vicky Pipe, was a trip in summer 2017 in which they visited every 2,564 stations in England, Scotland and Wales. They had produced 4 videos a week in which they had many conversations with local public and explored rural areas, which they looked at how vital a railway was to a small community otherwise disconnected and how that railway line holds the community together. Their trip has inspired many to have their own adventure, and visit rural areas linked by railways to see how the railway links them. In conclusion, a railway is one of the most valuable things for a rural community. It gets people to work, shop and play. It helps grow economies, provides a lifeline for hotels and shops, and it can provide access to areas otherwise unreachable. This has inspired many to carry out trips around the country by train, exploring branch line Britain and how this is fundamental to modern society.